You're in for a treat. As the co-founder of the Robert H. Jackson Center, we are thrilled to have this opportunity to commemorate one of Justice Jackson's foremost opinions, if not his number one, West Virginia versus Barnette. We have some history with these individuals who we'll be interviewing. Just to kind of recap, back in 2002, I believe, I tracked down Marie and Lillian Barnette and had a chance to, Gaithy Barnette, down in Charleston area. So I didn't know you knew what was happening, but all of a sudden this guy with the camcorder tracked you down. We went to a Kingdom Hall and we had a chance to chat. And you were gracious enough to put up with me. And some of the interviews you just saw, in 2006 we had a chance to bring the Barnette sisters here, and together with our friends at C-SPAN filmed a presentation with Professor Barrett, the Robert Jackson biographer, and Bennett Bosky, who was the law clerk for Justice Harlan Stone during the Barnette case. That was really cool. And a few years ago, I had the privilege, together with Phil Donahue, who you just saw clips on, to meet Judith and to interview Lillian Gobitis, and that was a thrill for us at the Jackson Center. And here we are today with an opportunity to just revisit this special historical period of time which resulted in a case which has 75 years from today, had tremendous legacy aspects, constitutional jurisprudence extraordinaire. Let me introduce them while I have the chance here, and then we're going to dive right into an interview. As has been mentioned, to my immediate left, Judith Gobitis Close, the daughter of Lillian Gobitis, and who was the stage manager, by the way, when Phil and I were down in Atlanta during the interview. Next to her, I'm thrilled to introduce Louise Blanton. Louise Blanton, member of the Jehovah's Witness, who at age 91, if I can be so bold, but you look terrific. And I'm not sure I should have disclosed that. I may be in trouble here. But she lived it. She lived it from literally as a member of the Jehovah's Witness when the Gobitis case came down, having to go to a kingdom school and being there for over 2.5 years, and ending when the Barnette case was decided. And immediately to Louise's left is Marie Barnette, one of those two Barnette sisters who were part and parcel of the West Virginia versus Barnette. So I'm just going to kind of sashay over to this chair here, and we'll have a chance to chat a little bit and get the story from those who lived it. And there's a reason for this order here, Gobitis to Barnette. We've been seeing that on this wonderful presentation that preceded this. From a practical perspective, we're talking about Jehovah's Witness. Was that part of your mom and brother's world, or was that something that their parents were part of?
Well, originally, my mom's side of the family was Methodist, my grandmother's side of the family, and my grandfather's side was Catholic. So this came about from their parents. And when they started reading, my grandfather would sneak in the room and look at the literature. When they'd come home, he'd say, "Guess what I learned today?" And he got very intrigued by what he felt was really the truth. So it kind of got handed down that way.
And at what point did your mother ever mention when she got the word as to how they might react to the Pledge of Allegiance that was, of course, prevalent in all public schools?
Well, she really, was mentioning how concerned it was going to be that everything changed. Their whole world changed once the decision came down. And when she took her stand, she knew that everything would change into how she viewed life and how life viewed her.
And in school at the time, they were expelled. How did her classmates treat her?
They really turned their back on her for the most part. There was a few that were still loyal to her, but for the most part, they turned their back and turned against her, threw pebbles at her, just mocked her, whatever they could do. And she went from being one of the most popular girls in school to one of the most hated girls in school.
How did that affect her sense of humor and probably her faith?
It made her faith even stronger because she knew she had to rely on Jehovah more than anything else. It always reminds you what your priority is in life and who you're worshiping and what your strength comes from. So it kind of takes away from the circumstances that you're going through and gives you strength.
Louise, you were in New Jersey, and talk a little bit about your family's life path into Jehovah's Witness.
My family started studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses in 1938. My father, the son of a Methodist minister, objected strenuously to the teachings originally because he thought he knew the Bible from end to end. But over a period of just a month or so, he began to see that there was so much in the Bible he didn't understand and that he could learn from this study. So the family started studying. From 1938 until 1939, we increased in our knowledge of the Bible and of what Jehovah's Witnesses stand for. When I got baptized in 1939, shortly thereafter, I decided that I was going to make Jehovah, the God of the Bible, my God, and I was going to live by his standards. I was 13, and I was not the normal 13 because I was the oldest girl in the family of 10, and I had a lot of responsibility. So when my parents saw that I was serious about what I had learned, they let me get baptized.
So as a member of the faith and also being of age to be in the public school system, when did the flag salute become an issue in your life?
Shortly after I got baptized and I had begun to reevaluate the things that the Bible sets forth as standards for us, my parents were giving us different discussions about Bible characters. And one of those incidences, we were discussing Daniel and his 3 companions. And from that, I drew the conclusion that I had to make a choice too. And I chose to no longer salute the flag because to me, it was like bowing down to an image or a representation of a government other than God's government.
So this is part of Exodus, thou shalt not worship a graven image.
True, that's a part of it.
And as you demonstrated that, at what point was there an aha moment when you had the class began every day with the salute to the Pledge of Allegiance? At one point you chose not to salute.
Yes. To tell the truth, that morning I was a nervous wreck. I didn't know exactly how the class would react because I had always been careful of my conduct. My parents demanded it. But when I did stand that day and not put my hand over my heart, the teacher immediately stopped the program and told me that I had not gotten into the right position. So they started over again, and I just stood there. And then she told me, out of the class. So my brother and I, who were in the same grade, went outside into the hall where we waited until the class was finished with the exercise. She came out right after that and took us to the principal's office. And he was not nearly as pleasant as she was.
Mm-hmm. Now, then, were you expelled?
Yes, that day. He gave us one more opportunity, He said, you go back in the class and salute the flag, and this is the end of it. But when I told him I couldn't do that, he said, then you will be expelled. So he gave me a note. My brother and I gave us notes to take home that they were demanding that our parents attend a meeting with the school board. And so that was, I think, a week later, we had a meeting with the school board, at which time the assistant to Mr. Covington, Bill Jackson, met with us and helped us in the procedure to explain our position,
And what was the decision of the school board?
that we'd be expelled immediately.
Then what did you do for education?
That was a difficult time because I think I mentioned before how much I loved school. School was a break for me, and because I was interested in learning new things, I felt crushed that I could no longer go to school. But when our society, the Watchtower Society, learned of our situation, they sent legal help, and they told us every day, go to school, because the school board had said if we were not going to school, the parents would be punished, and we would be put in reform schools. That really frightened us.
What time period was this, Louise?
This was 1940, and it was probably close to the end of the school term.
So at that point, 1940, towards the end of the school, there had been a decision decided by the Supreme Court relating to Lillian's mother and uncle. Were you aware of that Gobitis decision?
Very much. Our whole family was following the case. And like the Gobitises, we were shocked. It caused Jehovah's Witnesses across the country to be amazed that such a thing would happen. But our choice had been made. We continued to be loyal to our faith and our desire to please our Creator. And so we were willing to accept the consequences.
And the consequences were the creation of a Kingdom School.
Eventually.
Okay.
Until that time, we had to go to school every morning and be expelled every day from the classroom
Gosh.
in order that we would not be accused of being truants. So that was not very pleasant because we took the school bus to school, and on the school bus, they'd start hitting us on the back of the head and calling us names of every description. And immediately after we got off the school bus, on the school grounds, before we could even get to the class, they would gang up on us. And constantly we were being hit with sticks and stones and sometimes rocks.
This is, now, Gobitis has been decided, you've been expelled from school, you have to go in every day, expelled so that your parents aren't arrested for having truants. In West Virginia, Marie, what was going on in your world? Maybe I should back up to say, was your family raised as part of Jehovah's Witness? What was the entry point into the faith?
My parents started studying when I was a baby. And my dad and all his family came into the truth at the same time, about 1933, 34.
So you grew up in that environment,
Yes.
and what was going on because you went to a public school, Slip Hill Grade School, as I recall.
Yes.
So when you walk into schools at that time, was there a mandatory flag salute in West Virginia?
In West Virginia, that really didn't become a problem until after the war started in 41. And after that, then they began to require that to be a flag salute in the schools. And when we went to school, it was in the spring because probably February, March. And one day they were doing the flag salute, and my sister and I stood up, but we didn't do the flag salute. And I noticed the teacher leaving the room, and she went and got the principal. And so he asked us to come out of the room, and we had to explain to him why we didn't. And he wasn't very pleased with us. He was kind of upset. And he finally said, well, if you're not going to salute the flag, then you'll have to go home. You can't attend school. So like Louise, we went to school every morning, and when the flag salute, after the flag salute program was over, well, then we had to go home. And that went on for several weeks.
Talk about the administration of the West Virginia School Board, because obviously there was a legal aspect to all of this. And did you see your parents engaged lawyers, or were lawyers provided to them?
Yes, there was a local lawyer who he was not a witness, but he was favorable to our beliefs, and his name was Mr. Meldolf, and he took over the case. And after the lawyers got into it, and I'm sure that they conferred with Brother Covington, they finally told us that don't go back to school. You don't have to go every morning. But then after that, then they did send a truant officer to our home, wanted to know why we weren't in school. And of course, my mother said, you won't let her go to school. And my dad had to appear in a court and put up bond to keep him going to jail, because they did take him to court for it.
So what was the decision of went to the federal district court at that time, and kind of the winds of change. We've learned a little bit about that today, where all of a sudden that which occurred in Gobitis led to a lot of persecutions, which Louise and your mother Lillian felt, and then kind of works its way to 1942, where you are expelled and truant officers come knocking on your door, and your dad has to post bail. But how were you treated?
Well, in the area we lived in, it was kind of a rural area. The children weren't cruel to us. They were curious. They asked questions. We explained to them our stand, but they weren't cruel to us. I had some cousins who lived in different area who were beaten up and been really cruel to them. But we were very fortunate in that fact that the children were not cruel to the point that they wanted to be mean to us or anything. Just curious.
Were you aware of the Gobitis case?
I do not remember.
Did your dad
no.
ever talk about that or anything?
If he did, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
I probably did, because they were very aware of everything that was going on. But in my memory, I don't remember them talking about it. But evidently they taught us what we should do, because when the time came, we knew what we were supposed to do. We were taught what our stand was and what we were supposed to say.
It worked its way up to a decision by the Board of Education, which said you're expelled. And then it worked its way into the federal district court system, and you actually won.
Yes, in the courts in West Virginia, we did win. They said it was okay, we could go to school. In fact, we did start back to school the next fall. And the teachers weren't real pleased with us, but they couldn't do anything about it, because the court said you can go to school, and we did.
So the School Board of Education had an opinion which is contrary to what the federal district court said, and then the Board of Education kept moving itself up, thinking, probably with some reason, that there was a precedent, Gobitis, that they'd probably win the day. Do you recall the circumstances under which you learned of the Supreme Court decision?
Not really. I just know that I can remember them talking about it, that we had won in the courts, and that from now on, there would be no question that we could go to school. I don't remember them being a big production about it at that time, except they were pleased, of course, that the courts had settled in our favor.
When you went back to school with pure Supreme Court, you know, order, did the students treat you any differently? You sense any of that?
No, the school we went to, it was very calm. I don't remember any of them really even talking to us about the point that we didn't salute the flag at that time. Evidently, by being in West Virginia, that the courts had settled in our favor, that the schools had been informed of that, and we weren't treated badly, no.
So, your mother, we talked about that time period, 1940, when the decision, the Gobitis decision, until 1943. What was her sense of that? Did she have some optimism about what might occur? Do you recall her talking about that?
It was more just that she was treating it on a day-to-day basis, just doing what they had to do to keep the Kingdom School going, and just to keep out of reform school, which is one of those great fears they had, and to keep things in alliance as much as they could with what was going on, and doing their part to keep the education going.
And at one point, that Barnette decision finds its way into the knowledge base of your mother and uncle. What was her reaction? Do you remember?
Well, they're very happy to hear that. They were too old to try to go back to school at that point, but other kids were encouraged to try to go back. Some were accepted, some still weren't. It wasn't completely in the hearts of the schools to open them with welcome arms just yet, but some of them were allowed to come back.
Louise, in your world, you'd spent 2.5 years in Lakewood, New Jersey, as I recall, at a Kingdom school. While all of this was percolating through the court system, what was life like in the Kingdom school?
Well, it was sort of like paradise compared to what we had been through. But it was challenging in the sense that we had to be away from home. It was a boarding school. The society had purchased or leased a hotel for the purpose of housing the students. And most of us lived some distance away. We were about 90 miles away. So my father would take us to school either Sunday night or early Monday morning, and we would stay until the weekend. During the course of the week, the curriculum was like most schools, with the exception, of course, that we didn't have the flag salute in the morning. We did have a reading of a Bible text on a daily basis, and discussion of a particular verse of the Bible. Also, during the morning, we talked about different Bible texts that we were to memorize. It helped us to focus on the reason we were there and to build on our knowledge of our Creator.
Then at some point in 1943, June 14th, 1943, the Barnette decision is decided. How do you learn about that?
In school, we let out a hoop that could have been heard across the county. We were so delighted. At the same time, shortly thereafter, it turned into groaning because the teacher told us this would be the last time we would be together in this school, because now you're free to go back to public school where you can exemplify the life of a Christian before your fellow students.
So you do go back to school, public school. This would be in the fall of 1943.
I personally didn't go back.
Okay.
I was 16. My parents allowed me to enter the full-time service that I had already been participating in, and to take courses outside of the school system, and finally pass the GED test in order to get a diploma.
We saw in the play earlier today about some of the persecutions that Jehovah's Witnesses occurred because they were also registered as conscientious objectors during the time of the war. Clearly, this is the winds of war and the wartime period. How did that impact your family?
Pretty much. I had an older brother who was draft age and who had to serve time in prison for his conscientious objection. The brother next to him never had to go to prison, but he was brought before the board or whatever court in order to state his objection, and he got a 4F classification because of his health. But my older brother did have to go.
Let me ask a question. I don't think we've ever asked this, but Billy, was he subjected to, what did he do?
I'm not aware of what he did during that time.
Yeah.
That has never come up.
Yeah, just curious. We are here commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Barnette case, and there would not have been a Barnette case if there hadn't been a Gobitis case. As you sit here and listen to those presentations that have occurred, what's your sense of this, Judith?
I love the fact that I just learned this weekend that my mom and Maria got to meet each other as children. Maria had children as 13-year-olds. That I never knew, and that just really just pulled it all together for me.
Well, I'll have Louise maybe tell the story, and I'll come right back to you, Judith. How did you meet Lillian?
Yeah.
The school in Pennsylvania, the Kingdom School in Pennsylvania, and the Kingdom School in Lakewood had the same principal. It was a brother from Watchtower Farms. His name was Parkhurst. And shortly after Kingdom School took off in Jersey, he thought it would be nice for us to meet the students in the school in Pennsylvania, which had been in session long before ours had. And so on that occasion, I got a chance to meet Lillian.
Well, at that point, this would have been early 40s. The Gobitis case had already been decided. Did she think that what did you think? I mean, here she was kind of notable. I mean, there was a Gobitis.
It was very exciting to meet her. I felt like, well, even now, I feel so privileged to be between these two sisters who actually had the front row, so to speak, in the battle. But I benefited because they stood firm. And I'm so happy today to have this opportunity to get to know these two sisters and and her mother that I met on that one occasion.
What's your sense of what's going on here today?
Oh, it's just beautiful to have this opportunity to have this many people in the room and this representation of this history. It's a beautiful experience I never thought I'd be a part of. And it's a real privilege to be here. And it helped me a lot to know what my parents both went through. My dad being in a concentration camp at the exact same time my mom was going through this. So it helped me be strong when I had my own situations at school come up where I was beat up in school for being a witness. And they were just infuriated that I was different, that I was a witness. They flat out said it. But it was a way to build up my own courage for that.
I'm going to pause for a second. You just again threw out the line that I'm not sure everybody is aware of, but that your father, being a Jehovah's Witness, was subjected to the persecutions in Germany that play depicted. Want to give us a Reader's Digest of that?
Yes, he went to his very first door, how we go on our door-to-door ministry. He's at his very first door. He's not even baptized, and he was arrested at the first door. And he was the youngest in the camp. He was between 20 and 21. Didn't get to see his family for about 10 years. And I finally sat down with him one day and asked him how many times he'd been put in jails or prisons or a concentration camp, and it was 11 times. And he gave us the name of each one. And so, and he was wanted. His poster was in the post offices. So he had to use disguises, fake names, because he was smuggling the witness literature in the underground efforts. So he was in danger a lot. But he really felt like Jehovah and his angels helped that work go on. There was a lot of real close calls. But the stories he discussed, he spoke in 75 different classes in Atlanta. And he gave them an opportunity to have a firsthand experience of what it was really like.
So this is a unique story because we read during World War II an awful lot about the resistance, various nationals who resisted against the Third Reich. Here in your case, your dad was really doing preservation of the Jehovah's Witness faith through some underground publications, etc.
Yes, he was. And it was interesting that he wasn't always helped by fellow Jehovah's Witnesses. There were some that just simply hated Hitler that would take him in under great risk in their home, and just so he could have a place to sleep. And sometimes he would have to escape in the middle of the night if the SS came to the door. But there were some that were just amazing kindnesses that people did provide in various towns that he went to.
What do you think the legacy of the Barnette case is?
I think it's marvelous because it made such a huge impact on the judicial system and how it impacted everyone in the United States. It's providing freedoms for all Americans to practice their faith freely. And we know that could change, but for now, it's something to enjoy and cherish.
Louise, do you have a sense of the legacy of what you lived in between Gobitis and Barnette, and what the legacy of that is?
I feel very privileged. I never expected to be this old, but for the rest of my life, I have been impacted by the experience that I went through in my youth. It has helped me to rely more on the Creator, to appreciate the value of prayer, and to know when something is right and you choose that to be a part of your life, that your love for the Creator and for other humans can be enhanced by sharing what you know with others. It's made a big impact on my life.
There is no commemoration today if there wasn't a Barnette case. And what your dad, through your actions, precipitated in that case in West Virginia, we wouldn't have the decision, we wouldn't have the words of Robert Jackson. So I'll let you have the final word, Marie, as to a sense of the legacy of your named sacred case.
Well, of course, I'm very proud that I was able to become, I was able to stand up and answer the calls of the flag salute. I was taught that from youth on, of course, and it's given me a lot of privileges over the years. I've had contact with different ones who have wanted to know the story, have called and asked questions. It's given me an opportunity to give a witness to many people. I've been asked, like this is the second time I've come here, and it's been such a privilege. And I'm just proud that I was able to stand up for my beliefs and for the rights, and help the rights of others to be able to stand up also. And I'm not very articulate in speaking, but I'm just overwhelmed at how much this has meant to me, and it has meant to everyone, all the children over the years that has had not to have to fight the fight that we did, and I was able to help them in some way.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, from Gobitis to Barnette.